In the tranquil garden of the nursing home, where the scent of blooming spring flowers mingled with the soft hum of nature, an elderly woman named Agnes sat on a wooden bench. Her silver hair, once a cascade of golden waves, now lay neatly pinned beneath a blue scarf. Her eyes, though clouded by the fog of dementia, occasionally sparkled with a distant, almost ethereal light. Agnes's hands, gnarled and veined, rested on the lap of her floral dress, and she seemed to be lost in a world of her own, a world that no one else could quite enter. The nursing home was a place of quiet dignity, where time moved slowly, and the residents found solace in the simple pleasures of life. The garden, with its vibrant colors and gentle breezes, was a sanctuary for those who could still appreciate it. Today, however, the garden was not just a place of peace. It was the theater of a reunion that transcended time and memory. Agnes's daughter, Elizabeth, had been planning this moment for weeks. It was a labor of love, driven by a desperate hope that something could break through the barriers of her mother's dementia and bring back the woman she once knew. Elizabeth had heard stories of animals recognizing their former owners, even after long periods apart. She had read about the therapeutic effects of animal visits on patients with cognitive impairments, but she had never seen it in action, and the idea seemed almost too miraculous to be true. Today, however, was different. Today, a horse named Jubilee was brought to the nursing home. Jubilee was no ordinary horse. He was Agnes's former companion, a bond forged over countless rides and shared moments. 15 years had passed since Jubilee was sold, and Elizabeth had tracked him down with the help of a local equestrian center. The center's owner, a kind woman named Martha, agreed to bring Jubilee for a visit, hoping to witness the magic of this reunion. As Elizabeth watched from a distance, her heart was a mix of anticipation and anxiety. She had seen her mother's mind deteriorate over the years, the dementia slowly erasing the vibrant, spirited woman who had raised her. Agnes had been a horsewoman at heart, a passion that had defined much of her life. Elizabeth could still remember the summer days spent at the farm, the sound of hooves on the dirt, and the way her mother's face would light up when she talked about her beloved horse. Martha led Jubilee into the garden, and the horse's presence instantly transformed the atmosphere. The other residents, usually docile and withdrawn, seemed to stir with a newfound curiosity. Some pointed and smiled, their faces brightening at the sight of the majestic animal. Others simply watched, their eyes reflecting the same wonder that Elizabeth felt. Jubilee's coat was as glossy as ever, his mane and tail flowing like streams of dark chocolate. He moved gracefully, his steps light and almost delicate, as if he understood the delicacy of the moment. Martha guided him towards Agnes, and as Jubilee approached, Elizabeth held her breath, waiting for any sign that her mother might recognize him. Agnes, however, remained lost in her own thoughts, her gaze fixed on a distant point. Elizabeth's heart ached, wondering if this visit would be in vain. But then, something changed. As Jubilee came to a stop beside Agnes, the horse nuzzled her hand, his warm breath a gentle reminder of their past. For a moment, Agnes's hand remained still, as if she were unsure of what to do. Then, slowly, her fingers moved, and she began to stroke Jubilee's nose. The horse responded by lowering his head, allowing her to touch his silky fur. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears as she watched this tender interaction. It was a small gesture, but it was the first time in years that Agnes had shown any interest in her surroundings. Martha, sensing the significance of the moment, stepped back, giving Agnes and Jubilee space. Elizabeth joined her, and the two women watched in silence as Agnes continued to pet the horse. Elizabeth couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, a glimmer that this visit might indeed have a profound effect on her mother. Meanwhile, Agnes's face was changing. The lines of confusion and disorientation began to soften, and a faint smile curved her lips. Her eyes, though still cloudy, seemed to focus more intently on Jubilee. Elizabeth could almost see the wheels turning in her mother's mind, the memories beginning to surface like images in a long-forgotten photograph. Jubilee, Agnes whispered, her voice barely audible. The word was like a key unlocking a door, and Elizabeth felt a surge of emotion. It was the first time in years that Agnes had spoken a coherent word, and the fact that it was Jubilee's name made the moment even more poignant. The horse, as if understanding the gravity of the moment, neighed softly and moved closer to Agnes. She stood up, her movements tentative but determined, and she wrapped her arms around Jubilee's neck. The horse stood still, allowing her to hold on, and Elizabeth could see the tears forming in her mother's eyes. "Jubilee," Agnes repeated, her voice stronger this time. "My boy, you've come back to me." Elizabeth stepped forward, her own tears rolling down her cheeks. She placed a hand on her mother's shoulder, and Agnes turned to look at her. For the first time in a long while, Agnes's eyes met Elizabeth's, and there was a spark of recognition. "Elizabeth," Agnes said, her voice breaking. "My daughter, you remembered." Elizabeth nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and sorrow. "I remembered, Mother. I remembered how much you loved him." Agnes's face softened, and she stroked Jubilee's neck, her touch gentle and loving. "Oh, Jubilee, you were always my faithful friend. We rode through the fields, and you never let me fall. You were my strength, my solace." The memories continued to flood back, and Agnes began to recount stories from their past. Spoke of the days when they would ride into the sunset, the wind in their hair, and the laughter that would fill the air. She talked about the times when Jubilee would carry her through the rain, his steady presence a comfort in the storm. Elizabeth listened, her heart aching at the beauty of these memories, memories that had been buried deep within her mother's mind for so long. One by one, the other residents in the garden began to join in, drawn by the warmth of the scene. They listened to Agnes's stories, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and empathy. For a moment, the garden was filled with the sound of Agnes's voice, and the air seemed to shimmer with the magic of the moment. Elizabeth watched as her mother's demeanor changed. The stiffness and fear that had been so prevalent in her recent years began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. Agnes's smile grew wider, and she laughed, a sound that Elizabeth had almost forgotten. Martha, moved by the scene, approached Agnes and Jubilee. "Would you like to take a ride, Agnes?" "Just a short one, around the garden." Agnes's eyes widened, and she looked at Elizabeth. "Can I, Elizabeth? Can I ride Jubilee one more time?" Elizabeth nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Of course, Mother. You can ride him as much as you like." With Martha's help, Agnes mounted Jubilee, and the horse took a slow, steady walk around the garden. Agnes's laughter mingled with the sound of Jubilee's hooves, and Elizabeth felt a sense of closure. It was as if the years had fallen away, and they were back in a time when life was simpler, when the bond between a woman and her horse was the strongest thing in the world. As they returned to the bench, Agnes dismounted, her legs unsteady, but her spirit unbroken. Sat back down, and Jubilee nuzzled her once more. Agnes's eyes were clear, and she looked at her daughter with a depth of understanding that had been missing for so long. "Thank you, Elizabeth," Agnes said, her voice steady. "Thank you for bringing my old friend back to see me. I didn't know how much I needed this." Elizabeth's tears flowed freely now. "I'm so glad you remember, Mother. Jubilee never forgot you, and neither did I." The visit continued for a while longer, with Agnes talking about her life on the farm, the rides they had shared, and the love she had for her horse. The other residents, inspired by Agnes's transformation, began to share their own stories, and the garden became a place of connection and healing. When it was time for Jubilee to leave, Agnes stood up and hugged the horse one last time. "I'll never forget you, my boy. You've given me back a piece of myself today." Jubilee neighed softly, as if understanding the depth of her words. Martha led him away, and Agnes returned to her seat on the bench, her eyes still bright with the memories that had been reignited. Elizabeth sat down next to her, and for the first time in a long while, they shared a moment of quiet contented silence. The garden, with its lush greenery and blooming flowers, seemed to embrace them both, a fitting backdrop for this miracle. "Mother," Elizabeth said, her voice trembling, "do you remember what you told me about Jubilee? You always said that no matter where life takes us, the bonds we form with those we love are never truly broken." Agnes nodded, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding. "That's right, Elizabeth. The bonds we form are eternal. They may fade, but they never disappear. Jubilee's visit today has shown me that." Elizabeth took her mother's hand, the warmth of her touch a comforting reassurance. "I'll make sure to bring Jubilee back as often as I can, Mother. He belongs here, with you." Agnes's smile was gentle and serene. "Thank you, my daughter. You've given me a gift today, one that no medicine could ever provide." As the afternoon sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Elizabeth felt a sense of peace settle over her. The bond between Agnes and Jubilee was a testament to the enduring nature of love, a reminder that even in the face of the most challenging circumstances, there is always a way to reconnect with the parts of ourselves that we thought were lost. The garden, now bathed in the warm light of dusk, seemed to pulse with the energy of the day's events. Agnes sat on the bench, her hand still resting on Jubilee's neck, and Elizabeth couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The horse had brought back more than just memories. He had brought back a piece of her mother's soul. As they prepared to leave the garden, Agnes turned to Elizabeth, her eyes clear and her voice steady. "I know I have dementia, Elizabeth, but today I felt whole again. Jubilee reminded me of who I am, and for that I am forever grateful." Elizabeth hugged her mother, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "I'm grateful too, Mother. Grateful for this moment, and for the chance to see you smile again." The nursing home garden, once a place of quiet solitude, had become a sanctuary of love and memory. And in the heart of that sanctuary, a horse and his former owner had found their way back to each other, a reunion that would be remembered for a lifetime.